All right, good morning. To begin, what we're going to start with today is that what we're going to try to achieve is improve our ability to determine the purpose in nonfiction writing, specifically essays or news articles. Now, this is a really essential reading skill to develop because if you're asking, okay, so what's in it for me? Why would I want to do this? I'm going to tell you that this is beneficial to you at the most basic level for standardized testing. Okay, the ACT, the SAT, the AP test. Even if you are dreaming of going to college to become a lawyer, the LSAT, which is the test that lawyers have to take to get into law school, it all centers on this type of reading, how to read for purpose and how to identify more clearly what an author is trying to do with a text. Okay? So that's really our ultimate goal in reading and just class today is we're going to be trying to determine the purpose of essays and articles. Now, like I said, being able to do this, being able to better determine an author's purpose in a text, in which rhetoric is particularly effective. Now, when I say that, that's the art of argumentation. In other words, how is an author, a writer, trying to persuade his audience about something? Better being able to recognize that, because that is rolled into the concept of purpose. That's going to really make you a more efficient and effective reader when it comes to nonfiction texts. Okay? Now, let's go back here. Okay, so when we're dealing with purpose, we are asking ourselves, we are internalizing one specific question, which is simply, why was this piece written? Okay, so that's what we really have to ask ourselves as readers, is what is the purpose for this writing? Okay, now, when we're asking ourselves that question, it's really crucial to note that knowing the author's purpose can single-handedly unlock the meaning of the work. Okay, so purpose and main idea are really inextricably linked. They're really tied together. So if we can determine what the purpose is, we can better determine the main idea of a piece of literature. Okay, so again, when we're asking ourselves why the author wrote this piece, by understanding that and better getting a handle on the purpose and main idea, that can help us lead us down a road where we can more effectively identify textual evidence that supports the main idea in a more accurate manner. Okay, so really, we are big things that when we're asking why this piece is written. Okay, so that purpose kind of leads itself down to what is the author trying to accomplish. Okay, what is the author's purpose in trying to write this piece? In other words, what does a writer want from a reader? Okay, that has several different facets that we're going to talk about in a moment. Okay, so that's what we're going to go through today. So what we're going to try to do today is really look at a four-step process that if you follow these steps and practice these steps when it comes to nonfiction texts, essays, articles, you can better identify the author's purpose in writing. And if you can do that efficiently and effectively, it's going to make you a more effective reader, but also a more effective test taker when it comes to those standardized test ratings. Okay, so by practicing these four steps, it's going to make you better at answering our essential question, why was this piece written? Okay, so before we get into reading, let's think about ourselves as writers. Okay, I want you to think about, why do you write what you write? Not just for homework, not just to get a grade. I want you to think about texts you've written recently. Okay, and by texts, I literally mean text messages. Okay, so why did you write a text message? Did you write one? Let's say, how did you write a text message to your friend? Did you do that in order to relate an experience to a friend, to tell them a specific narrative? Okay. Then what about if they change the audience to, say, you're someone at home, so some adult at home? Did you write a text to tell them when you'd be home? Now you're writing for something informational. Okay, so really the audience and who the audience is really kind of shapes the purpose as well. And also it kind of really breaks you down into the variety of ways and to think about the purposes of writing, excuse me. So when you are writing, really, you're trying to achieve specific purposes. The most basic being you're trying to inform someone of something, or you're trying to argue or persuade someone to do something else. You're trying to relate an experience to them. So there's really those kind of those are maybe our most basic three ways in which you would want to be writing something. And if you think about your text messages, they probably fall into those three buckets pretty specifically. Okay, so when people write not text messages but other texts, essays or news articles, how are they falling into these three buckets, and how do you achieve and figure out how they're doing that? Okay, so let's kind of go through some steps that you should follow. All right, so step one, if you are reading an essay or article, the first step you really want to take is try to identify that topic. Okay, so in other words, read the passage through completely and try to identify the topic. Who or what is the paragraph talking about? So this is really the first essential thing. If we're going to boil this down, it's just subject. Who or what is this paragraph or passage about? Okay. Don't worry about trying to decide, is it arguing? Is it informational? Trying to categorize it, but just worry about who's the subject. Okay. Identify the topic. All right. Once you got the topic, try to move on to summarizing the passage. Okay, after reading the passage thoroughly, try to come up with what is it about in your own words. Give the gist of the piece. Okay, pretend you have just 10 to 12 words. Okay, what would you say in those 10 to 12 words what this passage is about? Okay, once you accomplish that, then I want you to look at the first and last sentences of the passage. Now, the first sentences are known as the topic sentences in paragraphs or body paragraphs. Last sentences, the conclusions. Those are very revealing for what the purpose could be. Anything that goes on inside the body of the paragraph is typically our evidence. So really you want to look at those main idea type connections in the topic sentences or the conclusions. Okay, because the author is going to usually put the main idea near that first or last sentence. So really isolate them and center your attention on them. But there's an asterisk. Be careful, okay? Because sometimes authors will use those hinge words, those shifting words, but however, in contrast, nevertheless, those words are going to mean that you see those words, that really means that the second sentence is actually the main idea. So be careful of that, okay? Be aware of that, especially that's a place where standardized testing will really try to trip you up. But you also want to just worry about that in general as well, okay? So you want to look for where you see those words which negate or qualify the first sentence, and that's our clue that the second sentence is actually the main idea. All right. Once we've done those three steps, we can move on to our final step. Okay. So if you're still having difficulty, maybe this is something that this is the last step that you can really go through, which is look for a repetition of ideas. Okay. Anything that's repeated, be it fiction or nonfiction, is always essential to understanding the big idea, the purpose of the piece. Okay. So look for the repetition of ideas. Now, if you're reading through a paragraph and you're still not quite sure how to summarize it because there's so much information, look for those repeated words or phrases, okay? So if we follow these 4 steps in this procedure, once again, if we're going through those, you are identifying the topic, all right? You identify the topic. You summarize the passage in 10 to 12 words. You're going to look at the first and last sentences, all right? And then finally, look for repetition, okay? So once again, rule of threes, if I'm going to tell you it for the third time, it's look for the topic, summarize in one sentence, look at first and last sentences, repetition of ideas, okay? If you follow these 4 steps, it will help you identify it more effectively and efficiently, the purpose of the pieces, all right? Now, let's go ahead and practice that out. So here is a passage that comes from a nonfiction essay. This passage is from a author named Richard Florida. Yes, seriously, in a article titled "The Great Reset." So I'm just going to look at this. Is the first paragraph of the essay. So he writes, In today's idea-driven economy, the cost of time is what really matters. With the constant pressure to innovate, it makes little sense to waste countless collective hours commuting. So, the most line-efficient and productive regions are those in which people are thinking and working, not sitting in traffic. Okay, so if I'm going to go through and look for what this paragraph's main idea is, my first step, if I'm looking for that topic. All right, so if I'm looking through this, I'm seeing, and if I'm trying to boil the topic down to simply what's the subject of this piece, this can be done in one sentence, 1 to 2 words, short phrase. Well, I noticed that we start off talking about, today's idea-driven economy, and I see a lot of key things that focus on the idea of work. So I would center my attention on the word economy. Economy would be our topic here in this sentence, or in this passage, because everything that we're talking about are words and phrases that relate to the idea of economy, how we make money. All right, so I've centered my topic down to the economy. What is the author's purpose in talking about the economy? So, what if I summarize? Here's my attempt at summarizing. Based off what I read, my gist of this is that the economy runs on thinking today, so time spent driving is wasted. Okay, now I did cheat, I'll admit to my own cheating here. I told you to do it in 10 to 12 words. I did it in 13. We're dealing with a ballpark situation here. Notice, but I'm only 1 word over. I'm not a whole paragraph over. Okay, yes, because if I go back and if I look at my paragraph, I see that much of what we're talking about here, we see those words like waste countless hours, okay, being productive, traffic. I see so much that deals with that idea about how to be efficient and work more effectively in the economy. So that's how I would summarize it, is that driving is wasted time. Okay, let me look now at those first and last sentences here. In today's idea-driven economy, the cost of time is what really matters. Move on. So the most line-efficient and productive regions are those in which people are thinking and working, not sitting in traffic. So if I isolate those first and last sentences, now what do I see here is that in that first sentence, the argument starts with that topic, the idea-driven economy. The argument is focused not only on the economy, but also time. That time is valuable to the economy. We've all heard the phrase, time is money. Then in our last conclusion sentence, we're more specific. We take this idea of time and we zoom in and we really drill down on it to be more specific. How do we waste time? Well, sitting in traffic. Driving is a waste of time. Okay, so right here we really get his purpose revealed through the first and last sentence. Okay, this is where we really can hone in on this, and we can really find that purpose for his writing revealed to us in 2 sentences, the first and last one. So by doing these steps, we can get to it in an accurate answer in 3 steps. But for the sake of purpose and to help you really see and practice those skills, let's look at the final step. So if I then look for repetition, I notice a couple of things in this passage. There's a couple of repeated ideas. Now, it's not necessarily repeated words. We want to look for concepts that are repeated, not necessarily words, okay? So we see a couple of things jump out. The first one being that idea about time, something dealing with passage of time. That jumped out twice. Same goes for that idea about being productive and work, doing things. So we know that there's something as far as the purpose for this that relates to the idea of work and time. So we can see that through repetition of ideas within this passage. So we can see how step 4 even adds a little bit more details if we need it. Okay, so using these 4 steps is going to be what is going to be necessary to help us better define and better identify the author's purpose in writing pieces. In other words, what are they trying to achieve? So here in this author's piece, we can formulate that his purpose in writing this text is to argue, to persuade us that driving to jobs, that not working from home, because he's talking about the idea-driven economy. If I'm putting this all together, what I'm putting together is the idea that if we are wasting time driving, so that spending time not working from home is not productive to our economy, that our economy could in fact be better if we don't. I can put all this purpose together and his argument just from following these 3 steps. Now, this is what I'm going to ask you to do in the future in independent work. All right.